Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Azure podcast. This episode is number 434. We'll be talking about Azure Traffic Manager with, we think, we didn't actually go check the actual numbers, but Cynthia and I are pretty sure that Abhishek is going to be tied now for the most attendances on the show, or most appearances on the show at 3. And so we're happy to have Abhishek Tiwari back. I'm joined here by Cynthia, and we are recording this episode on August 10th. Cynthia, why don't we get to the news?
Sure. There is one update around ACE, which is short for App Service Environment v3. That's very exciting, is that now they've GA'd the support for a custom domain suffix. I believe this is one of the challenges that customers migrating from older versions of ACE were running into that wasn't available in ACE v3 yet. And what this allows you to do is that now you're not restricted by the DNS settings of your ACE environment's default domain suffix. And now you're able to add whatever custom domain you want to use onto the internal load balancer. So now you can use your own domain suffix to access the apps in your ACE environment.
So this would be like if I want to put, Cynthia.com, on my app service. At that point, I can do whatever I want. Okay, awesome. A couple other ones. The first one is an Azure Active Directory one. I thought this was actually really nice because we've released the capability where you can go through, and it's public preview right now, but you go through and remove inactive users, right? Your Azure Active Directory is sort of like anything else. It develops cruft over time. Somebody who, a user you add temporarily and for some project, and you forget to remove them later. All that. Now you can go through and find the ones that are inactive and get them removed. And then the other one is, again, it's another preview for Azure Dedicated Host. And in this case, you can trigger a restart of the Azure Dedicated Host in place. So it'll stay on the same, underlying physical Azure infrastructure, but reboot that host. And again, this is nice because like anything else, lots of times, sometimes the quickest and fastest way to mitigate something is to reboot the machine. With dedicated hosts prior to this, all you could do with a server seal, which moves, it redeploys it, moves it to another host, and there's some additional uncertainty that comes with that. So again, this is a nice capability. This has existed for regular VMs for a while. Now you have the ability with the dedicated host. Just keep in mind though, if you do it for dedicated host, all the VMs that are running inside of this dedicated host, right, these are a real common scenario for this is nested virtualization. All the VMs inside will obviously get rebooted if you reboot the dedicated host. So again, a nice troubleshooting capability. So pretty short on news today, but no big deal. I think with that, Abhishek, we had you on to talk about Front Door and Azure DNS in the past, and when we were sort of cleaning up after that show, you mentioned, man, Traffic Manager would be a good topic. So here you are back again. What is this? First, remind us what you do for Microsoft, just in case our audience has forgotten. And then second off, what is this Traffic Manager thing?
Sure. First, happy to be back. You are right. This is my the third session or talk with you folks. I'm an engineering director, part of Azure. I'm responsible for managing the Azure DNS, which is again not a DNS for Azure, but for the entire Microsoft and Azure external customers. And Azure Front Door, which is the CDN and acceleration for the web apps, providing the protection using WAF and L7 DDoS functionalities, and Traffic Manager. And in this episode, I'm here to briefly talk about the Azure Traffic Manager. As the name suggests, Ivan, this is the service, PaaS platform service that allows customers to use to manage their traffic across well-distributed endpoints. The functionality-wise, it offers as a platform to connect the endpoints that are globally distributed, be let you have different algorithms to run. So basically, in the like Azure front door, do you want to do the performance based, where users can connect to endpoint that has the performance? Do you want to do the round robin? Do you want to do the high availability, failover, disaster recovery? So it's a platform that doing a massive level of traffic management for very, very large applications. Almost entire Microsoft large applications are customers or have taken explicit dependency on Azure Traffic Manager. So you talk about almost every Azure fundamental service boots with Azure Traffic Manager and the M365, Exchange, SharePoint. Everyone is using Traffic Manager in one form or the other. So that makes it like DNS, a dial tone service.
No pressure. Yeah, no pressure there, right?
No pressure there.
So when you mentioned that Traffic Manager kind of helps distribute or make sure that performance is high and no matter how customers are accessing the application, does that mean the underlying hosting of the application needs to live in X amount of regions? And do Traffic Manager correspond to I am West US, I'm in East US as well, and then I'm also in the Western Europe? And then is that how does Traffic Manager work with how I distribute my applications as well?
Yeah, happy to. In the previous episode, we talked about Azure Front Door. Azure Front Door does the similar thing, but it is where you have to host your application on Azure Front Door. Host at least the termination of your domain is on the Azure Front Door. On the other hand, Traffic Manager is completely agnostic to your application. You don't have to host anything on the Traffic Manager as part of you still own the domain, the naming, and every aspect of your application. It supports all protocols. So it could be any layer 4 TCP, UDP protocol. It could be web protocol as well. And it does not require your endpoints to be in on a specific. It can be anywhere within Azure regions, and then a matter of fact, it could be anywhere outside Azure as well, as long as they are publicly reachable over the internet. So no, you don't have to just for the using the Traffic Manager be bound to do something specific in your application, whether it's deployment, hosting, nothing.
I think that the distinction that I've always heard, and let's see if I've got this right, is that Traffic Manager at the end of the day is DNS based.
Yes.
Balancing, right? So I DNS name 1 goes here. I'm sorry, my DNS name Traffic Manager says, oh, you're from here, I'm going to send you this location. Yes. And you're from this other source, I'm going to send you that location. But it's all about resolving the IP underneath that. I might give a different IP back as a result to that, versus Front Door is closer to a proxy where I'm going to basically terminate my Absolutely. Connections at that point. Okay, so with the Traffic Manager, do I you said I can use any DNS or any name or any protocol. Do I have to, put a custom domain name in front of Traffic Manager? How do I, so I have my app in location A and location B. It's IP address 1 and IP address 2. Do I just need to set up these domain names and then configure it in Traffic Manager? What does that actual configuration look like?
So actual configuration would be pretty much you have say these endpoints. So you tell Traffic Manager, hey, my application is endpoint 1 and endpoint 2. And then actual internet facing domain is being resolved by the Traffic Manager, which is again part of the Azure DNS infra. So you have an application which is contoso.com, user will try to reach to contoso.com. It would end up using one of the Traffic Manager zone, which would be something like Traffic Manager.net, appended by something to the end. That end user is not even aware of it, right? It's just the DNS, how the chain resolution works. And then Traffic Manager would decide based on your own configuration that which endpoints you need to go.
Okay. And if my memory is right, Traffic Manager is actually it's one of the really, really old Azure services. It's been around for a long time to a large degree.
Yeah, it's like DNS. It's like, it has been around, but DNS is just chain, right? Like,
Yeah.
we started with something, and then we had this the ringmaster based architecture. Now we are going with the dual stack DNS plus plus, internally called, with the two stacks being an active. Same to like DNS traffic manager existed in form for for many years, but recently we converged into the upcoming DNS plus plus platform. So this is the completely new stack. Again, like DNS, it is a dual stack. It runs in two stacks, uh, which not share anything. And we are the only traffic manager service provider in across all the companies, cloud operators, that offer this functionality in dual stack. No one else does that, right?
We talked about this with DNS, and you had said that sort of end users would start seeing the dual stack DNS show up. I think somewhere around the end of this year, maybe.
Right.
Like it's for internal use, but it sounds like Traffic Manager is using it today. So if I'm an external customer, I'm actually using DNS plus plus. I just don't realize it yet because I'm not sort of directly doing it.
It's that transparent. Like, yes, and the traffic manager zones were one of the first one to move into the DNS plus plus. And this is the zone that are also moving into the active before some of the other large ones move to. So yes, if you are using traffic manager, you are already using DNS plus plus.
So this should bring confidence, right, in the chains down the road. Okay,
for quite some time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's pretty interesting. It could start with a simple thing, but when you go into the details of the things, like, how such a the service we get, there are, customers who would be deploying their endpoints running into multiple hundreds. So it's like, you are doing that balancing and then management across like 500 endpoints, and then it's just the nature of some of these really large applications. For example, Exchange, right? They would be having these shardings among millions of users, partitions distributed all across Azure regions and Microsoft data center. So if you multiply these numbers, it becomes a very large matrix.
Okay.
Have you mentioned that a traffic manager can help with any sort of internet accessible services that's hosted, whether inside or outside of Azure? Do you see traffic manager as a service that customers use early on as part of their like hybrid scenario, or as part of their migration?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the way we pitch our DNS is like, it's not like, for the customer that are hosted in Azure, but you can host your record, given that we are like, promising 100% SLA. So you could own or configure your application zone on the DNS. Same with the traffic manager. You could have not only just host your zone to the Azure DNS infra, but do the traffic management of the traffic or routing of the traffic using the traffic manager. And the zone hosting is especially for the when you are putting or thinking about the application architecture, comes the first one. And so yes, in a way, that is a step towards when you are looking to modernize or going digital completely or migrating towards the cloud, simplify some of these things. You'll get added advantages of Azure DNS, then later on, integration with other Azure properties. And then if you go, the combination of the hybrid, which is some of the DNS zones, added into the on-premise side, and then some of the public ones. And then the Azure VNet side, this whole strategy could be very well integrated in this combo.
And did you just say 100% SLA? Did I hear that right?
Yes.
That exists?
Yes.
Wow.
I think we say that in general for DNS.
Yes,
right?
that is yes. That is in general for DNS. Yeah. This whole purpose of dual stack and not sharing anything in those two stacks, including the build outs, other parts for both Azure Traffic Manager and DNS is our desire to be 100% available in any sort of issues.
Cynthia's head just sort of.
I was like, I think I only know the sun is maybe 100% available all the time, but wow.
That's funny. So you talked about using this to sort of span across regions and slices and everything. A lot of times, right, you have an existing application, and I want to then start slicing it and scaling it out and round robining customers order. How do I layer it into that if I have an existing Contoso.com app that's going, I don't know, on premises, right, or to a single Azure deployment? What do I have to do to put Traffic Manager in front of that, or should people be doing Traffic Manager by? Actually, let me ask the question differently. When should I start using it versus just using my endpoint? Is sort of maybe where I want to start. Like, should I always have Traffic Manager there, and then just maybe I'm not really routing it to different places, and that gives me some flexibility, or should I only add it when I'm to the point where I have multiple places I might route traffic?
Yeah, I mean, unlike Azure Front Door, you said Azure Front Door, even if you have not multiple places to route to your endpoint, just one, but the fact is it's terminating very close to the user. Azure Front Door would provide benefits of acceleration and also the COGS because it's bearing the brunt of all the SSL negotiation out there. But on the Traffic Manager, the value comes only if you have more than the one endpoint to do it.
Okay.
Because otherwise, on the DNS resolution side, since it has only one value to return, it will always return that value. And not much you would get. But yeah, as soon as you have more than one, that's where it starts giving you the value of availability, load balancing, traffic management. So my suggestion, and then our documentation says if you have more than one endpoint, then you should consider traffic management.
So that sort of leads into then the follow-up question is, okay, so I have my endpoint, Contoso.com is on, some app services deployment, and I'm in, West Europe, and then I want to add a Southeast Asia deployment. How complicated is it to layer Traffic Manager in front and get all my domain names moved without downtime? Is this going to be something I really need to have significant planning around, or at the end of the day, because it's just DNS, is this really just redoing some DNS pointers and as that resolves, it ends up working for customers? Like, what's the migration path from one to multiple?
So Traffic Manager, I won't trivialize, it's not a major effort to migrate the Traffic Manager. It's not. You don't need months of work and planning and it's a very simple, straightforward way of doing it. But at the same time, it's something you should just a design and then put the steps carefully, because not on the platform that could cause you risk, but you are moving your the DNS zone, right? To be hosted and then owned by the Traffic Manager, and the configuration mistake could lead getting your DNS resolution blocked, or
and then if it's not,
then you have nothing. And the one part I want to touch here, internally, it's not available for outside external customers, but a tool called Safe DNS. You must have heard, Ivan, right? That Safe DNS is a tool with lots of standard DNS practices that customer use when they are managing their zone, so that it tells, hey, if you are managing the zone and then putting into the DNS++ system, whether this particular change would work as you expected. It would give you the prefetched rather doing the simulation on it, and helps a lot. So that is something, if you are a large enterprise or moving a major part of your applications, should consider the best DNS practices and then some of the tooling and protection around it. But the overall effort is not even 15 minutes of the configuration time to propagate it all across and then available on the traffic manager.
So I mean, I think what I heard you say is it's sort of like any DNS
Right.
type change with the right planning and sort of the right thinking about it. It really isn't a huge deal, but you if you do it wrong, there's absolutely huge impact. If
Right.
if somebody mistypes an IP address behind a DNS name, you are down until that propagates out to the world. But with the right planning, this shouldn't be a big deal. All things being equal. Okay.
Absolutely. And then we on our side, once you are on the traffic manager, like any service, we look into the every aspect that it remains resilient to the issues, external issues faced by it. And I want to touch base. One of the brain for the traffic manager, or which is additional to DNS, is we call it probing plane. Probing plane is the large distributed plane. It's thousands and thousands of customers with hundreds of endpoints. So it's a very large metric. It probes and then keeps a schema of which all endpoints are healthy, which are not healthy, the latency and those parts. And that information is fed to all the services edges. That's where traffic manager is running along with the DNS. So that's a distributed plane. That customer configures the frequency of it, to the endpoint, say how frequently you want to get pro, when do you want to declare unhealthy, because you understand your application better. And then you can have a different algorithm out there to, do you want to have a performance based routing where we have internal map of the internet where we deploy these builds daily that gives the view of the world on the IP based. And this is all part of the CI/CD pipeline, which takes these map updates and gets deployed. A probing plane, it is a well distributed, but one aspect of core infra services, if entire probing plane goes down for whatever reason, and then yes, traffic manager would work based on the last set of health it has received. So the serving plane side, it would still function. But some of the key Azure infra, each serving plane, which we call a data plane, can see, hey, I'm not receiving any update from the probing plane. Hence, start doing the probing, which we call a dial tone probing to these essential service. And the reason for that is, if for any reason we need to use traffic manager to revive these essential service, probing plane down, we are still able to make those changes, bring up the infra, bring up some other region down, and then reboot it. So it's the planning and then design over the years, and then maturity of the system with each layer, and then fallback protection layers planned out there, like DNS.
It's tough when you're such a low level dependency, right? Because it sort of becomes a circular thing. Without some capabilities, you can't bring yourself up. You said something interesting on the probing points that I wanted to drill into a little bit, because I've actually seen customers make this mistake. Just like with the load balancer, when you set up your probes, you probably want to make sure you're probing the right place, right? Because otherwise, your probe endpoint may be successful, but your site might be down. What are some of the pitfalls of setting up my probes, or what are some of the best practices maybe on setting up those probes?
So the few things that you want to decide, depending upon the load and then application, in general, the frequency of the probing plane, right? How frequently you want to probe, and then get probed. Then the second aspect on the probing plane is, you have to be careful, when do you want to declare a particular endpoint is unhealthy. And then reason is this is the moment you declare, that's where the traffic manager would take the immediate action for any further new requests coming in and shifting the traffic, right? So when you are designing it, and then when you are designing it in a way where you declare one of the endpoints unhealthy, you should be aware there would be a traffic shift. Now the traffic shift in your application part, like, you would may have a very well distributed endpoints, and then things should be fine. It would get distributed again. If you have used the performance map, it's the routing control where it would go is not on your application hand. It's actually where the users are calling your application, right? So in that case, if you have a very concentrated set of users coming from a particular geo, and then you decide to declare, for whatever reason, the endpoint which is supposed to be closest to them, then this massive set of concentrated user would shift the DNS resolution, which is like, close. So that those are the aspects when you are doing it. You have to be plan it. Things majority times works out okay. Unless there are combination of failures happen, but these are the things that you should consider. In future, this is this is a public forum. In future, we are think the probe that you do should also carry some deep insights of your endpoints. And I'm not talking. This binary of healthy, unhealthy, it does not give you a gray picture, which is hey, I'm healthy, but I'm just about to be my saturation level, and then do something. Because then if application feels it's a saturation level, the only option it has, say unhealthy, and then let it cool for a while, and then say healthy again, right? Which makes a binary jump. So we are discussing with MSR and other folks, and then have this gray level of things coming out of the probe insights, and then ability to make these decisions when we're doing the traffic management and routing.
And so sort of like some soft decisions, like, hey, maybe I want to reduce my traffic, but not necessarily take it to zero. Right. Okay.
Today we have an algorithm the weighted round robin, where you declare this is I have, but these are still fixed set of or performant or failover disaster recovery sort of setting. But there are a lot of gray health that we are unable to find, and that's where we want to extend.
Okay, that I think that plays into my last question, which is, it sounds like if I'm using something like Traffic Manager, where at T1 my traffic is going here, and at T2 it might be going there because my other traffic, my other endpoint goes unhealthy for whatever reason, I probably need to make sure that I've got either sufficient scale or auto scale sort of going along with this, because otherwise, great, this one goes unhealthy, and now this other endpoint's getting 100% of the traffic. If it's not scaled sufficiently, now I go unhealthy over here, and now I'm in serious trouble.
Right. And that's where you configure your weighted round robin or round robin, and then change the configuration. That's why I said which algorithm you need to choose depending upon your user set, and also the endpoints distribution.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing worse than failing over to the other region would be the other region going down as well at that point. Okay.
Another advantage of Traffic Manager in the case, right? For example, DNS, Azure Front Door, both are Anycast based services, right? And it works really best for these applications. But people who are aware of Anycast, it requires a deep expertise, and then your management ancillary services to support, because Anycast failure is also catastrophic, right? Because it's a single IP that you are dealing with, and then if failure happens, it can propagates to by the nature of Anycast to the others. Traffic Manager offers us a way where you could get the Anycast advantage without doing Anycast. So you could have all these unicast endpoints, but from the world, you can just point it to the Traffic Manager and then let Traffic Manager decide. So that way,
right, because it's only returning one.
It's returning one, right?
Okay.
And then you can control it. So it gives you sometimes when you are making a decision what you should choose. Those are the also consideration apart from the load balancing and the management of your endpoints, the part you could consider.
Okay, great. No, this is awesome. I appreciate the overview and the intro to it. Any last any last thoughts on Traffic Manager that you want to leave the audience with?
I mean, as I said, like in our the next set of investment with the offering coming for the Traffic Manager would to extend the understanding of health more. And that's the area we would put our investment and focus on. Like DNS, we would be like announcing, making like the part on the dual stack, which like you don't have to do as a customer make any changes out there. It would be completely transparent. So
I'm seeing episode number 4 down the road at some point, right? Cool. Well, no, this is great. Abhishek, thank you again for coming on. It's always great to have you on the show. Cynthia, any last questions or comments?
No, this has been very enlightening for me, understanding how it actually works.
I still like the look on her face when Abhishek said 100% SLA. Like that,
Yeah.
we gotta make that. We gotta have to make that the still for this episode. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate you coming back, Abhishek.
Thank you for having me.